bisa langsung melakukan login ya di Google Cloud Console. Ini contohnya saya udah login menggunakan Google Cloud Console. Anda mendapatkan free ya untuk pertama kali ketika Anda mendaftarkan dari Google Cloud Console. Dan di sini Anda bisa mencoba-coba menggunakan server Google Cloud. Oke, seperti yang saya punya. Oke, kita lihat langsung saja bagaimana cara menginstalnya. Oke, setelah login Google Cloud, saya langsung klik link pada bagian komputer engine ini. Oke, nah, setelah di komputer engine kita bisa lakukan langsung saja ya, klik create instant. Sini kita bisa klik create instant. Oke, nah kita bisa memberikan nama instan untuk name yang akan kita buat, dan kita juga bisa memilih dari regional, oke, yang kita pilih gitu. Oke, ini saya juga lihat di sini saya masih mendapatkan free ya, lumayan banyak ya. Oke, kita lihat, saya akan coba membuat sebuah cloud baru ya. Di sini contohnya aja saya akan membuat di cloud, ini adalah yang low ya, low cost, misalnya low cost. Oke, berarti harganya relatif murah ya. Kalau low cost ini sini low. Oke, kita lihat contohnya ini. Oke, ini aja ya. Oke, ini untuk estimasi per bulannya ya. Oke, dan kita bisa memilih dari di sini. Saya coba kasih nama dulu. Ya. Setelah itu kita bisa memilih spek dari hardware yang kita inginkan. Oke, misalnya untuk install Ubuntu desktop minimal kita membutuhkan 4 GB memori, maka saya pilih yang E2 medium di sini ya. Gitu. Lalu kita pilih lagi di sini. Oke, boot disknya ya, boot disknya. Oke, sini saya pilih dari Ubuntu. Ubuntu versinya adalah, jangan pilih versi Ubuntu 20.04 LTS ya. Oke, diskboardnya boleh, misalnya Anda mau naikkan boleh di sini, contoh seperti ini. Ya, tentu kalau semakin besar size yang kita butuhkan maka harganya juga akan semakin besar. Contoh, kalau tadi 28 sekarang buat oke jadi 29 karena saya nambah sebesar 10 GB. Next, langkah selanjutnya boleh kita allow pada bagian firewall ya, misalnya kita akan allow pada HTTP dan HTTPS ya, seperti itu. Next, langkah selanjutnya kita klik aja create ya, kita klik create, kita klik create. Kita tunggu sampai dengan selesai. Nah, setelah selesai, kita akan coba klik kepada bagian SSH. SSH ya di sini ya, klik SSH. Oke, kita connect aja SSH-nya. Oke, setelah selesai, kita coba switch ke user root dengan mengetik dan mengganti passwordnya sesuai dengan yang kita inginkan. Next, langkah selanjutnya agar kita bisa login nantinya dengan menggunakan software putty, kita perlu membuka port SSH dengan cara seperti ini. Ini di sini nanti saya akan kasih link cara menginstalnya ya. Saya akan share di bagian deskripsi linknya. Setelah itu, oke, bisa aja langsung kita klik pada bagian ini. Saya copy pada bagian ini. Ctrl V aja, kita enter. Lalu kita turun ke bawah kursor. Oke, pada bagian password authentication-nya saya yang tadinya no menjadi yes. Oke. Lalu kita tambahkan lagi. Di sini permit loginnya juga saya akan copy lagi ya di sini. Password authentication sudah yes. Lalu berikutnya ya permit loginnya yes juga saya tambahkan. Yaitu Ctrl X, langsung kita save yes. Oke, kalau udah di save, kita kembali, kita restart terlebih dahulu ya, yang menggunakan ini. Kita restart. Next, langkah selanjutnya adalah kita bisa membuka terlebih dahulu untuk port yang digunakan oleh No Machine adalah port 4000. Untuk itu kita bisa membuka port 4000 ini dengan cara seperti ini. Oke. Di VPC di bagian ini ya. Lalu ini kita klik VPC network. Oke, kita cari di sini ada firewall. Itu. Setelah itu Anda bisa menambahkan untuk port yang dibutuhkan untuk remote menggunakan No Machine adalah port dari 4000 gitu. Untuk itu kita bisa, caranya adalah ini. Klik firewall ya, firewall. Oke. Jadi Anda bisa lakukan langsung aja klik pada bagian firewall rule ya. Kita klik pada bagian firewall rule itu. Di sini saya sudah lakukan allow ya pada port 4000 seperti ini No Machine. Oke, kita lihat. Anda bisa tadi klik ya, klik firewall. Ini adalah settingannya. Setelah klik firewall, silakan Anda beri namanya sesuai dengan yang Anda inginkan. itu ya, misalnya no machine ini. Oke, lalu kita terus priority-nya bisa Anda atur. Oke, nah source-nya bisa Anda ketik seperti ini aja, jadi kita izinkan dari mana aja IP-nya ya, seperti itu. Lalu TCP-nya kita atur ke angka 4000 gitu. Oke, jadi seperti ini aja untuk membuka port ya, untuk membuka port 4000 di cloud gitu. Next, langkah selanjutnya Anda tinggal lakukan save aja ya, tinggal lakukan save gitu. Oke, next, setelah ini langkah selanjutnya adalah setelah Anda membuka port, kita lanjut ke langkah berikutnya. Anda bisa langsung aja aktif di putty ya, putty software putty. Anda bisa remote, ini free ya. Untuk kita coba remote menggunakan putty untuk menginstal ya, menggunakan putty untuk menginstal. Sorry ya, kalau Anda juga belum membuka port dari tadi kan port untuk mematching, Anda misalnya belum membuka port untuk SSH, Anda juga bisa membuka port SSH ya. Dengan port 22, maka Anda bisa cek juga port 22 apakah sudah terbuka atau belum, selain port dari 40. Lalu kita bisa remote menggunakan IP dari address cloud yang kita punya. Ini oke, kita back lagi ke sini. Terus saya coba copy IP-nya ya. Tadi saya udah klik untuk cloud virtual machine-nya. Ini coba copy IP public-nya, external IP-nya. Langsung kita menggunakan putty di sini. Oke, open. Nah, seperti ini kita yes aja. Langsung kita login dengan menggunakan user root. Oke, passwordnya. Enter. Nah, oke. Next, langkah selanjutnya kita lihat di sini untuk menginstal dari Ubuntu desktop. Setelah kita login putty, ya kan, kita update dulu ya dengan menggunakan apt update seperti ini. Oke, kita bisa klik aja sebelah kanan mouse, enter. Oke, setelah itu kita bisa langsung aja install untuk Ubuntu desktopnya dengan perintah ini. Kita tunggu ya, kita yes aja. Di sini kita harus menunggu ya. Oke, next, langkah selanjutnya setelah Anda menginstal dari Ubuntu desktop, kita perlu menginstal dari no machine. Oke, kita tinggal copy aja di sini. Klik kanan mouse, enter. Langkah selanjutnya kita dibagi ini. Klik kanan mouse, enter. Kita tunggu. Next, langkah selanjutnya kita bisa menambah user untuk login seperti ini. Oke. Yes. Oke, langkah selanjutnya satu lagi. Oke, lalu kita reboot. Oke, next, setelah selesai. Ingat ya, kita sudah melakukan open port di step awal. Kalau belum, silakan kita buka open port 4000. Oke. Next, langkah selanjutnya kita bisa install no machine untuk Windows, untuk remote Windows. Jadi ini kita perlu menginstalnya ya. Lah, kita bisa hubungi aja, kita bisa kunjungi website ini. Ya, lalu kita bisa download dan install. Ini kita bisa install untuk Windows ya, silakan aja tinggal klik, lalu kita tinggal setup. Oke. Next, langkah selanjutnya setelah kita install no machine di komputer kita, ya sekarang kita tinggal lakukan remote. Ya, langkahnya seperti ini. Anda bisa lakukan add aja di sini. Oke. Lalu kita lihat lagi IP-nya. Oke, kita copy IP publiknya ini, external IP-nya. Ini. Bisa kasih nama. Lalu kita tinggal lakukan connect. Kita tunggu apakah berhasil. Oke, berhasil ya. Kita tinggal yes. Kita masukkan user yang tadi kita buat. Passwordnya. Ingat di langkah sebelumnya kan kita sudah membuat user ini ya. Di langkah ini. Oke. Lalu kita silakan login. Oke, langsung kita yes saja. Oke, kita oke. Oke. Next, saya berhasil login di komputer yang baru kita install. Di sini saya udah install. Saya bisa setting yang lainnya ya. Contoh di sini saya akan coba setting dari back. Ini tampilan untuk displaynya ini setting. Di resolusi yang kita mau silakan. Contohnya ini display. Oke, kita telah berhasil install dari Ubuntu. Oke, kita sudah berhasil install Ubuntu desktop. Silakan sekarang Anda tinggal browsing. Anda bisa menggunakan seperti biasa, tapi di sini kita sudah menginstal dengan GUI, graphic user interface-nya. Coba kita lihat. Kita coba cek IP sesuai atau tidak ya. Saya ingin cek IP di sini. IP-nya, oke. My IP location. Oke. Oke. Oke, sesuai ya. Platformnya adalah Linux. Oke, IP location-nya ini sudah sesuai ya. Tadi saya pilih yang luar ya.
Hello and welcome to this Control Web Panel tutorial. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to install CWP. Before installing CWP, there's a few things you'll need to know and arrange first. Starting with the fact that once you install CWP, there is no uninstaller to remove it. Once you install CWP, if you want to remove it from the server, you'll have to reinstall the server to remove it. You should also take note of the fact that CWP only supports static IP addresses. We do not support dynamic, sticky, or internal IP addresses. And you should only install CWP on a freshly installed operating system without any configuration changes. Before starting the installation process, you'll have to set up a host name. This host name cannot be the same as any domain that is on your server. For example, if test.com is a domain on your server, you would have to use hostname.test.com as your fully qualified host name. You can use this command for hostname setup, in this example, to create server1.test.com. Next, you'll have to set up your server IP addresses, which means defining additional IP addresses, subnet addresses, and default gateway IP addresses for your server. Your service provider will provide you with this information. And then there's software requirements. You must have a clean or fresh installation of a supported operating system. Supported versions include CentOS Linux 7 and 8, Rocky Linux 8, Alma Linux 8, Oracle Linux 7 and 8, and Red Hat Linux 7 and 8. However, we recommend CentOS 7 or CentOS 8 as the most widely used versions with the best support. For CentOS 8, we recommend after installing CentOS 8 to convert it to CWP CentOS 8 Stream Delayed, as it provides a more stable system with delayed updates. For hardware requirements, you'll need a 64-bit operating system with a minimum of 2 GB of RAM. However, 4 GB of RAM is recommended, so you'll have full functionality such as antivirus scans of emails. Once you're ready, it's time to install the required packages for CWP installation. You can access your server command line using a utility like putty or something similar. In this case, we'll input our host name, our port, and connect via SSH, and then open. Next, we'll enter our login ID and password. Now we'll install the required packages before CWP installation. So for that, we'll enter the command yum-y install wget. And in this case, we see that the wget package is already installed and updated to the latest version. Now we're ready to start the CWP installation. So let's restart our session. Log in. Enter our password. And then we can enter this command. cd/user/local/src wget http://centos-webpanel.com/cwp-el7-latest cwp-el7-latest. And in just a couple of minutes, CWP is installed. To complete the installation, you'll have to reboot the server. Now we can log into CWP using our IP address plus port 2031. So we'll just copy that, open a new browser window, and go to the link. If you get a security warning, you can just accept the risk and continue. And this brings us to the login page. Here you can enter your username and password and log in. And here we have a brand new installation of CWP. But as you can see, we've got a lot of warnings set up here because we haven't set it up yet. So we'll go into those steps next. First, let's just clear some of these warnings so we can see our desktop better. And if we scroll to the bottom, we can see that we're running CWP Pro. If for any reason you have a red banner here that says you are not running CWP Pro, you can order and update your license for your server from the CWP website. The first item that we'll set up is to define our shared IP. To access that, we'll go to the left-hand sidebar and twirl down the CWP settings to open the submenu, and then select Edit Settings. And here we can see our shared IP. This needs to be the main public IP address which will be used for hosting accounts. If your server has a private IP, like the ones offered by Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, then it also needs to be set up for NAT. In a NATed setup, the shared IP needs to be your public IP. And the NAT local IP will be the local IP set on your server. You can check the local IP in CWP by going to Service SSH here in the sidebar and selecting Network Configuration. And your local IPs will be shown here. In this case, we're using a public IP. If you have a private IP in your config files, it will appear in the drop-down list here, and you can select that, and then enable this checkbox to activate a NATed network configuration. For further instructions on this, you can click the hyperlink to open our help page. In this case, we are not using a private IP, so we'll be skipping this stage here. What we will do, however, is update the admin email. And this will be the root server admin email address, and we can select the checkbox to forward server system emails. Once we're done making our changes, scroll to the bottom and select Save Changes. It should be noted that if you're enabling NATed mode, be sure to rebuild your web servers when you're done. Next, we'll activate our backups. To do that, we'll go to the CWP settings in the admin bar and select Backup Configuration. Here we can either enable or disable the backup, and then choose our backup options, including our backup folder, and whether we want to backup daily, weekly, or monthly. Weekly backups occur every Sunday, and monthly backups occur on the first of every month. You can also enable MySQL backup, backup of all users, and this will force a backup for all accounts, even those without having backup enabled. And you can backup all emails. When you're done making your changes, save the changes. Next, we'll set up the host name. So over in the sidebar, we can select Server Settings and twirl down the arrow to open the submenu, and then select Change Host Name. For the host name setup, it's important to specify that for any subdomain we would be using for the host name, it should have an A record set to the server IP before configuring the host name. Then, the host name change will also install the free certificate for all system services using the same host name. If the host name has a valid A record, then the certificate will be fully valid for all services. But if the A record is not set, then CWP will generate a self-signed certificate, which will trigger a browser warning like we saw on the first login to CWP after the installation. Another important item to set up in advance is the RDNS PTRDNS record for the IP. This needs to be set with the server provider, and it's recommended to be the same as the host name to have a better email reputation when sending out emails from the server. And here we can see some errors because we don't have a valid host name set. So we'll just scroll down to the Change Host Name field here, and under the new host name, we'll enter our new host name. In this case, tutorials.test.com. And this will also generate a new SSL. You can choose your services, and when you're done, change the host name. And our host name is changed successfully. For more detailed info, we can check the log. And below, we can see that our errors have now been resolved, and the IP that our host name resolves to. Next, we'll set up our name servers. So to do that, We'll close this submenu here, and we'll open the new submenu for DNS functions, and then select Edit Name Server IPs. If you get a security warning, you can select Advanced and accept the risk. Here you'll add the subdomains that you want to use for your name servers and the IP for each. If you're only using one IP, then the IP will be the same for both. Don't forget that these name servers must be registered with your domain registrar, otherwise they will not work. Then for the IP address, we can copy the IP address here and paste that into the name server 1 box. And same thing for name server 2, copy that and paste that into the IP for name server 2. And for the name server IP, note that those IPs need to be the CWP server IP if you're using the same CWP server for domain name servers. If you're using some other name servers not related to CWP, like Cloudflare or CWP FreeDNS, then this setup is not required. And we'll need to restart the DNS server after we make our changes, so be sure that this box has been checked, and then go ahead and save your changes. Next, we'll select a web server setup. So for that, we'll go to the admin bar and select Web Server Settings, and then click Select Web Servers. And this opens a variety of configurations that we can choose for our web server setup, including Apache only, which is given a performance comparison of 35 to 45%, Nginx only, which gets a performance rating of 55%, Lightspeed Enterprise, 50%, Nginx and Apache, 45 to 55%, Nginx and Varnish, 45%, or a combination of Nginx, Varnish, and Apache, which gets the top performance ratings of 50 to 65%. Generally, we recommend either Nginx and Apache or Nginx, Varnish, and Apache for better performances, especially for high-traffic sites or multiple websites, as Nginx can handle more connections easily. So in this instance, we'll choose Nginx, Varnish, and Apache. And then scroll down and select Save and Rebuild the configuration. And in just a moment, our new web servers are installed. Next, we should install the main PHP versions. So again, we can collapse this submenu, and then open the PHP settings submenu, and then choose PHP version switcher. This is the main PHP version switcher, which sets the PHP version for all users. To change the default PHP version, select the drop-down menu, and select your default PHP. In this case, we will switch to the most recent version of PHP 7. Then we can review and select any options for this version. For example, if we want to add mcrypt, we can just click the toggle button to turn that on. And once we finish making our changes to the options, we can go ahead and save and build. And CWP is now compiling the new PHP. This will run in the background, and installation could take up to 15 minutes. In addition to setting the default PHP for all users, CWP also allows us to run different versions of PHP in different folders. So to set that, we would use PHP selector. And here we can install as many different versions of PHP as we wish. So for example, if we also want to install versions of PHP 5 and 8, we could do so, just by selecting the drop-down menu and then choosing the version we want to install. So let's choose 5 and 8. But before we save and build these, let's configure our options. So we'll click the Manage Options icon here under the Actions column. And this opens the options table for the PHP 8.1. And again, similar to the previous step, we can toggle any options that we want to add. And once we're happy with our changes, we can save the options. Now when we go back to our table, we can see that 8.1 has been configured with a custom configuration. Let's do the same with 5.6. We'll manage our options, scroll to find the options we want to add that, and then go back, save our changes, go back to our table, and we can see that our custom configurations for PHP 5.6 have been saved. Now we can go ahead and save and build these versions. We see the confirmation dialog, or we can just click Start Compile to build and install. And this process will also take place in the background and could take over 30 minutes depending on how many versions of PHP we're trying to install. We can also choose to install different versions of PHP, including PHP CGI and PHP FPM. PHP CGI is more flexible, but more resource intensive. PHP FPM is faster and more stable in case of account overloads, and is easier to limit with C groups. So to install PHP FPM, we use the PHP FPM selector. And similar to what we saw in the other builders, we can choose the version of PHP FPM that we want to install. In this case, we'll choose the latest version of 8.1. We can manage our options for this build, toggle any options we wish to add, save our options, go back to our table, and see our custom configuration has been saved. And at the moment, CWP is still compiling the previous PHP from the previous steps. So once that's done, we'll see buttons down at the bottom here that will allow us to save and build this configuration. Now it's time to enable our firewall. So let's go to the top and use the shortcut here to get back to the dashboard. And here we have a shortcut to our firewall, and we can see the warning here that our firewall is turned off. So we'll select Firewall Management. And this includes the CSF for Config Server Security and Firewall, as well as the LFD for the Login Failure daemon. And combined, they protect open ports and monitor failed logins. We can see the warning here that the firewall is disabled, so to enable it, we just click Enable Firewall. And we can see that our firewall is enabled. In this case, we don't need to restart the firewall, but as a best practice, anytime we make firewall changes, it's a good idea to restart the firewall. So our next security setup will be to set up mod security. So we'll just scroll down, and under the security submenu, we'll select Mod Security. Mod Security protects websites from exploits and SQL injection attacks and many other issues. Currently, it's not installed. To install Mod Security, first we have to select the rules engine that we want to use. The default is the OWASP old rules. You also have the option of using the OWASP latest rules. However, we recommend using the Komodo WAF rules as they are much simpler and easier for beginners. By selecting that, we get the latest version with automatic updates. Then we can click Install Mod Security Now. And in about a minute or two, Mod Security is installed, and we can see the installation log here. We can review that if we want to, and then click Close. Here we can see our Mod Security configurations, including the Komodo WAF that we selected, and the setting controls for the behavior of the rules engine. We can adjust these if we want to, and then save the configurations. After installing Mod Security, it's a good idea to restart your Apache web server. Next, let's set up our C groups. To do that, we'll scroll down to the Security submenu and select C Groups Resource Limits. C Groups will allow you to limit the resources per user, such as CPU percentage, system memory, network bandwidth, or combinations of these resources to avoid server overload. So to protect our server, let's install that service. We get a confirmation dialog. Are we sure? Yes, we're sure we want to install C Groups. And C Groups is installed. Here we can see the installation log, and if we scroll down, we can see the status and various options. So here you can enable the limit resources, including CPU, memory, and disk in-out. In this case, we'll select limit memory usage and save. And then we get the confirmation dialog letting us know this action will modify C Groups limits parameters and will be applied to all users' configuration files, and the C Group service will be reloaded after that. So we can confirm. And we can see that the limits have been saved successfully. And again, as a best practice, it's a good idea to restart the service when we make any changes. Next, let's set up our mail server manager. So to access that, we'll go to the left-hand sidebar and we'll select Email and open the submenu, and then select Mail Server Manager. And here we can rebuild our mail server with anti-spam protection. So here we can select the anti-spam and antivirus option, and RDNS check is also recommended, as well as installing DKIM and SPF, and Policy D is also recommended to enable hourly email limits to prevent outgoing spam. Although you have the option to reject unknown host names, this option is not recommended, so we'll leave this one unchecked. When you're done making your changes, click Rebuild Mail Server, and select OK. And then we get the installation log. We can scroll down and see our changes have been saved. And if we need to restart all the mail server processes, we can do that here by selecting Restart All Mail Server Services. We can also update the CLAM AV database if we want to. Next, we'll set up our Policy D. So for that, we'll go back up to the Email submenu and select Policy D Hourly Limits. This is where we can specify the hourly limits on outgoing emails to avoid spam going out on our servers. Here we can view, add, update, and delete Policy D packages. We see that 6 packages are included as a default, and we can add new packages by selecting Add New. The next step of our setup is to set up monitoring. So for that, we'll go to the Services Config submenu and twirl down to open that menu, and then select Monitoring. And Monit is a utility for managing and monitoring processes, files, directories, and devices on a Unix system. Monit conducts automatic maintenance and repair and can execute meaningful remedial actions in error situations, such as restarting the service if it goes down. And we can see that Monit is not installed at this point, so we'll go ahead and click Install Monit now. And then we get the confirmation window, and here we can go ahead and confirm the installation. And the package is installed successfully. We can close this window, and now we can see that monitoring via Monit is active. Here we have options to start the service, stop, or restart. Now we'll click on Configuration Files to enable monitoring for our various services. We can hold the Control or Command button to select multiple services. In this case, we'll start with Firewall LFD, and we'll add all PHP FPM versions that we've installed, including 7.2 and 5.3. Then we can add SSHD and some mail services. We'll start with Postfix, OpenDKIM, AMA VISD, Dovecot, Spam Assassin, and Policy D. Then we can add our CWP GUI services, including CWP SRV and CWP SRV PHP FPM. Then we can add named and any web servers we've installed, including Varnish, HTTPD, and Nginx. Then we can add the pure FTPD FTP and the postfix queue. This is mail queue monitoring, which will notify us if the mail queue has over 50 emails, and this default can be changed. And then we'll add MySQL. And for system monitoring, we'll add file system, syslog, and network. And then click the arrow to enable monitoring on these services. Once we've enabled monitoring, we can restart Monit. And we should wait for 2 minutes for the services monitoring to get activated, and then we can check the status under the Manage Services tab. Currently the status of all of these items are initializing, but we'll check back in a moment to make sure the status has been updated to OK. So after a couple of minutes, we can click Manage Services, and we can see the status of our various services have been updated to OK and monitored. And in certain cases, we can see that the status is not OK. In this instance, the link is down. For this process, the execution failed does not exist, and that's because we didn't actually install these PHP FPMs yet. And the postfix queue is still initializing. But in each of these cases where the status is not OK, we're given some explanation for the issue, or informed that the service maybe has not been installed yet. Next, let's change our SSH port. So under the Services Config submenu, we can select SSH configuration. And here we can see our SSH config. So here we can change the port to the desired port that we want to have our SSH through. But this should be a port that's not already in use. So in this example, we'll change our port to port 2222. And then we can scroll down and save our changes. And then we'll need to restart our SSH. So we'll go to the dashboard and scroll down to our services and find our SSH server here. And we'll go ahead and restart that. And that restarts the SSH server. But now we should make sure that the port is open in our firewall. So scroll back up to the top and we'll select our firewall management. And here we can see that that port is not currently in our open ports. So we'll click Configure to add this port. And we can scroll down. And here under the IPv4 port settings, we'll find our TCP in and out. So here we can add port 2222 for TCP in, and then also we will add port 2222 with a comma for TCP out. And then we'll scroll down and save our changes. And we can see the success dialog that our data is updated. But let's go back to the dashboard and go back to our firewall management. And because we made changes to the firewall, let's be sure to restart our firewall. And our setup is nearly done. The next thing we want to do is set up our packages for our users. So here under this sidebar, we'll select Packages to open the submenu, and then select Packages. And here we can see the one default package, which comes with CWP, but we can add as many packages as we like by clicking Add New Package. So for example, we might have a basic package, and the disk quota for that might only be 10,000 megabytes with a bandwidth of 10,000 megabytes, with only 5 FTPs, 5 email accounts, 5 email lists, 5 MySQLs, 5 subdomains, 5 park domains, and 5 add-on domains. And then we can go ahead and select our cgroups policy from the drop-down list. In this case, we'll just select the default since we haven't set up any others yet. And then we can go ahead and create that new package. And here we can see our new basic package has been added. And we can add as many new packages as we want to build out as many packages for our users as we wish. And once we have our packages set up, we're ready to start hosting. And that's how to install CWP. For more information, please visit the following links. We hope you found this tutorial useful. Thanks very much for watching.